Hulu buried a $2 billion Yahoo acquisition deal that would have changed everything. And the reason they killed it is something they never wanted you to know. In 2011, Yahoo was 3 weeks away from owning the future of streaming. The bid was on the table. The number was agreed upon. And then, quietly, the people who stood to lose the most made it vanish. You've spent years watching Netflix grow into a content empire, and Hulu cycle through identity crises before landing inside Disney's orbit. But there's a version of that story where none of that happens, where Yahoo owns your streaming queue, where the entire architecture of on-demand TV looks completely different. That version almost existed, and the real reason it didn't is worse than you think. To understand this, you have to go back to 2011. Streaming was still raw territory. Netflix had barely started testing the idea of original programming. Disney hadn't bought Marvel yet. And Hulu, owned in overlapping pieces by NBC Universal, News Corp, and Disney's ABC, was genuinely one of the hottest digital properties in the world. It had premium network content, a functioning subscription model, and real traffic at a moment when the competition was still arguing about whether people would pay for streaming at all. Hulu's owners decided that spring to test the open market. They hired Morgan Stanley to run a formal sale process, set an aggressive asking price, and waited to see who showed up. Google made noise, Amazon circled, and Yahoo, then one of the most visited websites on the internet, sitting on billions in cash from its early stake in Alibaba, entered the room with structured intent and a real offer on paper. This wasn't a casual expression of interest. Yahoo's bid was organized, vetted, and internally championed at the executive level. Reports at the time placed the offer at $2 billion. CEO Carol Bartz and the board framed it as the transformation play, the deal that would pivot Yahoo from an aging web portal into a legitimate media powerhouse. Context matters here. Yahoo had passed on acquiring Google in 2002 for $1 billion. They had turned down Microsoft's $44.6 billion buyout offer in 2008. Hulu was supposed to be the acquisition that proved the company could finally see value before it compounded beyond reach. Internally, this wasn't just about buying a platform. It was about buying a content pipeline, an established subscriber base, and permanent relationships with every major Hollywood studio. By every contemporaneous account, the deal got close. Genuinely, documentably close. But here's where the fracture begins. Hulu's 3 owners were never actually aligned on selling. NBC Universal, News Corp, and Disney had each contributed content to the platform under different assumptions about what it would eventually become. NBC and Fox had been using Hulu as a distribution safety valve, a place to put their broadcast content while the cable model held. Disney was still in the middle of calculating how digital rights fit into a long-term strategy that nobody had fully articulated yet. A sale to Yahoo meant permanently surrendering control over how their content lived online. And beyond the ownership politics, there was a question no one was saying out loud in the meetings. What happens to the premium content agreements that made Hulu worth $2 billion the moment the owners are no longer the owners? Every network executive in that process understood that a Yahoo acquisition meant the next rights negotiation would be a very different conversation. So they began, quietly, to slow things down. Here is what they never actually reported. The deal didn't collapse because Yahoo's offer was insufficient. It didn't die because of rights complications or regulatory exposure. It died because the sale process was never a real sale. In August 2011, after weeks of competitive bidding from Yahoo, Amazon, and others, Hulu's board announced it had decided not to sell, and instead committed $500 million of fresh capital from its existing owners to continue building independently. What that press release buried was the mechanism. The auction had been a valuation exercise. NBC Universal, News Corp, and Disney used the Yahoo bidding process to establish what Hulu was worth on the open market, and then used that number as internal leverage to justify a capital reinvestment that tightened each owner's grip on the platform. You were never supposed to connect those two events. The $500 million announcement came wrapped in triumphant language about Hulu's future and independent ambition. The actual message, delivered clearly to every technology company watching from Silicon Valley, was that Hollywood was not selling its distribution infrastructure. Not to Yahoo, not to anyone. Carol Bartz was fired from Yahoo 3 weeks later, in September 2011, via a phone call that lasted less than 2 minutes. The board cited strategic drift. But the Hulu deal had already written the ending. A Yahoo-owned Hulu in 2011 would have compressed the entire streaming timeline by years. Yahoo had the reach, the cash reserves, and the advertiser relationships to accelerate what Netflix spent the better part of a decade building incrementally. Instead, Yahoo launched Yahoo Screen in 2013, a streaming platform nobody wanted, that shut down in 2016 after spending its content budget on a community revival that drew real, loyal viewers and generated almost no monetizable traffic. Hulu became a Disney asset. Streaming's architecture, the one you navigate right now, was locked into place in those 3 weeks in August 2011 when one board chose leverage over a sale. So here's the question nobody has asked publicly. If Hulu's owners used that process in bad faith, what other deals were run the same way? Because NBC didn't stop there, and what they did next makes the Yahoo deal look like a practice run.